everybody. Hi. Thank you so much for attending our summer programming series, Members Lounge Redux. Welcome to Utopia Falls, the director's vision. My name is Melanie Orr, and I'm the manager of programming at the Canadian Academy. Before we begin, we wish to acknowledge those Indigenous nations on whose lands we live and work. And as we are connecting virtually from different places on the map, we encourage you to go to native-land.ca and learn about the nations and traditional lands on which you reside. Members Lounge Redux is presented by CBC Gem, with programming partners Canadian Media Producers Association, Deluxe Toronto, Directors Guild of Canada in Ontario, Ontario Creates, and William F. White International, Inc. A few quick bits of housekeeping. The chat function is open, as you can see. Please feel free to use liberally. Also, we will be using the Q&A, so drop your questions in there, and we'll be referring to those during the Q&A portion of this webinar. And with no further ado, I am very excited to invite Ify Chiwetelu, host of CBC's Now or Never, to lead this roundtable discussion with our esteemed guests. Ify.
Hello. Oh, this is exciting. Seeing all of our faces popping up here. Thank you so much for having me. It is an honor to be presenting this panel to get into the world of Utopia Falls. As their faces and mics are being turned on, I'm going to introduce you to the panelists whom you may already know. I'm going to start with the creator, director, writer behind Utopia Falls, and that is RT Thorne, who has emerged as one of Canada's most eclectic storytellers since debuting in the music video filmmaking scene over a decade ago. And I'm going to say some of those titles again, because you are the creator, executive producer, director, co-writer, boss man of Utopia Falls.
Yeah. We gotta work something out. We gotta work something out where you do my intros, That's amazing.
Listen, the hip hop energy of Utopia Falls, I'm just your hype man right now. That's all it is. I'm gonna follow you around. But Utopia Falls, this genre-bending Afro-futuristic science fiction series that premiered as a Hulu original and on CBC Gem in 2020. We'll find out a lot more about your journey as we go on, but I'm going to also introduce Warren P. Sonoda. I'm not going to forget the P.
Stands for pretentious, Ify. Stands for pretentious.
Own it. You are a BAFTA-winning and Emmy-nominated filmmaker who's directed 11 feature films and over 70 episodes of TV, including the new Utopia Falls, as well as Lockdown for YouTube Originals, which is completely shot remotely during quarantine.
It was.
Very exciting.
Mel was on that with me too. It was a lot of fun.
Okay.
Quarantine shows, yes.
Well, let me introduce Mel, who, we just met, so Mel feels too casual. I'm going to say Melanie.
That's fine. If ever know me as Melanie or Mel. It's
okay. This is M-Dog, who is an intuitive director who maintains her vision while allowing the time to approach the material naturally with her actors. She is a highly valued multi-platform director with extraordinary achievements. She has achieved great success with 75 plus episodes of television to her credits, as well as expanding into 1 hour drama with credits on Dark Matter and multiple episodes on the YA series Utopia Falls. So thank you for being here. And I'm obviously not forgetting Sudz, just in case you thought. Sudz Sutherland, thank you so much for being here. He works on both sides of the fence as a freelance writer and a director for TV dramas and feature films. His sophomore feature film, Home Again, won the prestigious PAF and BAFTA Festival Choice Awards in Los Angeles and was recently nominated for Best Direction from the Directors Guild of Canada. Home Again was the follow-up to his multiple award-winning and Genie-nominated debut feature film, Love, Sex, and Eating the Bones, which won the Best First Feature at TIFF. And he's currently writing a new pilot and feature and tries to fill up as many yellow legal pads with his long hand I don't see any legal pads. Are they in front of you right now?
Got him. You've got him.
Never.
Oh, look at that. Look at that. Amazing.
I love it. I love it. You're true to your bio.
Yes.
I'm going to say to everyone joining, I can see people are already popping things into the Q&A. And so please do that throughout this conversation. We're hoping to get your questions answered from this great panel. But I want to start by talking about the series, Utopia Falls. It's been so interesting to me looking around and seeing so many reviewers and critics struggling to describe it and trying to come up with different math. Like, it's Hunger Games meets this plus this and all these kind of references, trying to figure out a way to define it. And I'm curious for you, RT, like what were your references when you were creating this?
Yeah, I mean, look, I feel like it is something that is new, and it is something that, you know, I mean, from the get-go, when it was like, you know, thinking about doing something that's science fiction and hip hop, everybody just looks at you strange because they just don't think those two things could come together. So, you know, it's definitely like hard to classify, and you know, like a lot of Black art out there, sometimes when you know, a mainstream media tries to take it, they often do these comparisons to things that they draw on, you know, but I think it's more unique than those things. You know, I think sometimes that process is one of almost like erasure of how special it can be. And you know, it's much more than a Hunger Games meets Glee. In fact, those things have nothing culturally about what makes the show special. What makes the show special is that it is a show about, you know, history, the importance of history, the importance of knowledge, and then also the importance of finding one's voice and using that history, using that cultural knowledge to cause a revolution. And that's really, you know, to me, what the show is really about. It's not a revolution of violence, specifically so. It's not a revolution of guns and things like that are normally portrayed in those types of shows. It's a cultural revolution. And I felt like a lot of the reviewers it's like that shit went right over their heads, truth be told. So that's what I think makes the thing special. And that's why hip hop is not just an add-on in the show. It's not just science fiction and they play hip hop tracks. It's really the spirit of what hip hop is. It's a voice to people who were not heard before, and it gives them a voice to tell their stories. And that's what's so important about these young people of the future, discovering this culture and this knowledge. And so, yeah, I mean, you know, you asked me what my things were. It was just that. It's just what was important to me when I was growing up, hip hop. It gave me a chance to see other young Black men and young sisters finding a way to express themselves in a music industry that wasn't really keen on them doing it in a raw way. When they had to tell their stories of what's happening around them in the environment, the injustice that they see, the problems that they see, they used hip hop. And it gave me a voice, you know, listening to it. And so I've always been a hip hop head. And then absolutely, you know, science fiction. I've been a science fiction kid. I'm a comic book kid. So, you know, dreaming of different places to go, you know, dreaming of different places I could be, and, you know, mashing those two things together. You know, Star Trek is in there, you know what I mean? Obviously, you know, Star Wars, you know, Lando being a big impression on me, you know, and, you know, just kind of mashing those things together to make something that I hoped would resonate.
Yeah. And I really do love that, because I think so many times people want to police identities and control what can be combined. And like you said, for you, it was very natural to have this love of hip hop and also hold this love of science fiction.
Yeah.
For Melanie, Sudz, and Warren, I'm curious, what was your first reaction when you were introduced to the world of Utopia Falls?
I'll jump in first. I mean, I was very fortunate to kind of get a sneak peek as RT was putting it together, and my first reaction was just go for it. You know, I go for it because it really fills a vessel that hasn't been put out there to be filled yet. And I was blown away. I saw a little sizzle reel that he put together. I don't even know, RT, if you had your full, if it was just a treatment or a Bible at that point, but it was just a genesis of an idea. And I kind of knew right away that this was unique and you just had to go for it.
Yeah,
Sudz?
I'll go.
I'll go to Melanie. Yep.
Yeah, when I so I met with RT, and I think was that Sonar that we met, I think, in the boardroom, and there was, you had just filled that boardroom with all of these images. You had pulled so many astonishing, and I remember just walking into that room, and we start talking, and I'm just looking around at everything, and I think I was just all enthralled with like, tell me more, tell me all about this world, because I think you had pulled such great images to really describe where we were going to go with this series. So I think that was it. Like, I was just like, once I saw that and you were telling me about the characters, I'm like, I'm all in. I want to be a part of this show. Mm-hmm.
What were some of those images that really struck you about this world, Melanie?
Well, it was interesting because it wasn't really images I had seen. Like, they were very sci-fi, but very like huge, broad landscapes, and it was interesting shapes, and it was colors, and there was tones, and I would say it was just sort of like the idea of like the buildings and the world that was created there was, not so much of a show that was just like an internal show, like inside a spaceship, for example. It was really a large landscape to play on.
And I think RT picked some political imagery within the sci-fi sort of lookbook that he was putting together that really kind of started to plant the seed of what the show was going to be about.
Yeah, because I was like, you had me at sci-fi, and so you had me at sci-fi because I love sci-fi, but as Black folks, we don't often get a chance to participate in it, because if you look at like the history of sci-fi, especially film sci-fi, you look and there are not a lot of people of color, a lot of Black folks, and it's like the question is, well, what are your plans for us? in a way. So when RT said, I got this sci-fi thing, and obviously there's a lot of music in it, and then when he showed me the lookbook and all the images, that's a thing, like RT really knew what he wanted. And that was like the other thing that I was kind of like, he has a very clear vision of what he wants to do. And that was, his ability to convey that story and convey everything that he wanted to get out of it. So that convinced all the people, to line up the money. But he convinced us all with, it's a very clear vision. And I think that's what we all drew us to want to participate in it.
Mm. Yeah. Sudz, as you talk about just what representation has looked like in that sci-fi genre, it reminds me, as I was watching the series, I was finding myself like almost wanting more explanations around their ethnicities and cultural backgrounds. And I think that's possibly because I've been conditioned with the media I've taken in to sort of like, if I see you in this space, I need to know this cliche question that I've been asked so many times, like, where are you from? Like, why are you here? And I think that's one of the successes of the series is that you don't sort of play to that, like their influences sort of reveal themselves. How important do you feel that was specifically in this young adult genre?
Yeah, I mean, we made conscious choices of this kind of thing, and it goes into the world building of Utopia Falls and sort of New Babel in specific terms, in terms of their society. We really, tried to think of a world that if before they're existing, something massive has happened to the world, and now these people have to start rebuilding. To me, it's like they can't start their society from a place that is going to have some of our issues, obviously, that we're going through, specifically right now, So the idea was, is if they're going to start rebuilding the society, they're going to make certain choices that are going to strip away the things that divide people, So there's a very specific desire to have, an incredible amount of diversity on the screen, not just because I'm a filmmaker of color and I just want to see that shit because I don't get to see it normally. So, but it's not just that decision. It's also in this world, one of the things that divides us clearly are, racial divides and religious divides. And so, if a government is trying to put together a society, build this now from the ground up, they're going to learn from the past. And they're going to be like, we saw we had some massive problems with this stuff and how old societies dealt with this. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to create a society that feels equal for a lot of people. And to do that, they had to start stripping away the history that informs some of this stuff. So it's a curated society. And that's, the interesting thing is that a lot of people at the beginning of the show, they're like, everything seems so nice and just like there's no conflict. And and yes, that's unrealistic, but the fact of the matter is that they stripped those things away so that people didn't have the reference of where they've come from and how they've been persecuted or, those kinds of problems in the past. So they exist kind of in ignorance. And what the show is really about is discovering that that has been stripped away from them without telling them. So they haven't been given a choice. And now as they start to discover some of their history, that's a problem now because you made a choice that I didn't get to decide on, and the lies that come with that. And so that was very, very specific in the way that we built it, that they would start from a place of kind of ignorance and then come to a place of waking up of knowledge.
I think wherever you're from has become almost a microaggression now. And I loved how when RT and his team of writers put it together, it kind of subtly addressed that. Yeah, right. It's like addresses that in the writing and in the episodes, I think.
Yeah. As you're describing this world of utopia and the systems that exist, it feels very Canadian. Just in the ways that there's like this idea of Canadian exceptionalism. Sometimes perhaps we're a utopia in comparison to the United States. And, there's a moment earlier in the series especially when the two main characters, Leah and Bodhi, are told that their artistic expression is subversive, is divisive, and a challenge to this idea of diversity that that they're trying to establish. And I'm curious for you all as creators and creatives, what have those moments been in your careers? Have those been experiences that you've had?
Let's go first.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think the show is like a rebellion from what they have told. No one's told me directly, no, you can't make something like this. But I think there's a sort of history. Like there's no secret that we went. We actually went out to Hulu first. We didn't pitch this in Canada, and that's just because the Canadian landscape, as diverse and accepting as we all purport it to be, is not so. And that's our white little lie, great North white little lie. It's just some of these things in terms of cultural art are just not appreciated and not really encouraged either. So it was when we started talking about the show, it was like there's no way we could actually pitch this here at first. We had to go down stateside. So that's just one example of being sort of confronted by that in our world. I don't know. I got plenty others, but you know,
we can all share the stories of oppression. It's fine. We can tell.
I just think the simple fact that the show exists is a political statement. I mean, we were talking earlier in the preamble before the Zoom started, Ify, is that when I started music videos, and in hindsight, I wasn't aware of it when I was 21. Like, I wasn't a fully formed political person back then, but just being a Japanese Canadian on a music video set as a director, as the youngest person on the set usually, was a political statement. And the fact that it didn't stop me from continuing to do work. I tell the story all the time. When Mina Shum made Double Happiness, it's 94, I think, when it came out, I'm like, there's another Asian director in Canada making movies? Holy shit. And the movie was amazing. Like that, I think, is kind of the landscape, at least the landscape I came out of. I don't know. Mel, Sudz?
I'm just a little. Can you just say the question again? Because you literally like froze on my screen. So I didn't actually.
Okay. I was just sort of just trying to draw that link between what the characters were going through of being told that their creative expression was divisive or subversive, and a challenge to this idea of diversity that that they were told existed. And so I was just curious if there's parallels in your own career and your own creativity of having those experiences.
Yeah.
I mean, our whole career.
Yeah, it's like my whole career.
That's a Wednesday for us.
Yeah, like these things are happen on the daily. But I think that I could like literally go and give you a list for every like interaction that I remember just trying to exist in this space. And I think what we're going up against, and it continues to play out obviously today in this racial reckoning, this is a new term that people are using, but the idea of a black body inhabiting a quote unquote white space, because typically if you're thinking about a director, you think, white male, glasses, baseball hat, beard. And then that's
white running
shoes. With tennis shoes, what do you say?
Yeah, the white running shoes.
And white running shoes. And that's like the stereotype that we get. Like if you think about like when you were a kid, you think God is an old white man with a big beard. So, but that's the stereotype that you have. But as a black person, as a woman, as a Japanese Canadian, if you inhabit this space as a director, you're challenging the programming. So whether that's the fact of your existence and you're trying to command the crew and you're leading the crew and they respond to you in a certain way. If the default position is a sort of white male director, and and Melanie and any female director can tell you about how sometimes they are received by crews in general. The fact that being a black male, I have a certain amount of male privilege, but the last show I was in, one of the assistant directors was like, "Are you one of my stand-ins? Come over here." And I was like, hold on a second. I just work with you. You really don't know who you're talking. You don't see me. You just don't see me. So when you take the very real, thing of like, oh, I got this sci-fi hip hop thing that I want to tell this story. It's a challenge to people. Just the fact that this idea exists, it's a huge challenge because they're got to make this intellectual leap because they never considered black bodies in these spaces before.
Yeah.
And so I think that the very real challenge formally and story-wise that Utopia Falls presents to the viewer is something that, they got to be up for, and once they open their eyes, they're like, oh shit, this is amazing. This is great. I want to be here. I want to be with these people,
Babble.
and RT was really got this amazing cast, You know, like
Yeah.
they're so talented. They're so beautiful. They were so open and easy to work with. I mean, it was a dream. Like these guys are so, and I say guys, I mean, that's a gender neutral term. They're so good. And you just keep seeing them pop up on all these other shows too.
Mhm.
And it's a really fantastic cast.
And they knew that we were part of something special too, in
Yeah.
terms of the type of material they were given to perform was, I mean, you know, many discussions about, well, we've never done this before.
Yeah.
You know,
I do want to talk about the experiences with the cast, but I want to give Melanie an opportunity to answer
Yes.
or respond to
Yeah.
that last question.
Well, I mean, clearly I'm a female director, which has definitely been a long road, and a road that I tried to break onto for a long time. I started out as a script supervisor on shows, and I worked in a lot of kids' TV. And then I was realizing, I'm like, we're making all this television for youth, and it's all made by men. Whether it's even a female lead, it's all written by men and all directed by men. And it wasn't until I was on one specific show where they were kind of giving a line read to this female actress, and I was just like, this is not ever a way that she would say this. But you know, like children, children watch shows and emulate shows, and it's so important that we're really showing them like different ways to be and comfortable and not fitting into this one little box, because that's not what we should be doing. And so, you know, I definitely at that point I was like, you know, like I need to work in, you know, kids TV, and I definitely want to work in the YA space. And, you know, it was a road for me for sure. And I would go back and forth between directing jobs and continuity jobs. And, you know, I have this hilarious story. I was working on a show in Miami, and I showed up. And so another director, a male director, was starting to, he did the first block, and then I come in for the second block, and it's the first day on the floor, and I go up and I'm talking to the camera operator, and he's just looking at me. He's like, why are you talking to me? Like, who are you? And I was like, oh no, I'm the director. You know, and so like, you know, you have the, like, that's that. And, you know, you get the questions all the time. Who's watching your kid while you're working? Like it's crazy. It's definitely things that you have to fight for in this industry too, and sort of like try to change people's mentalities of it. But, you know, like, what do you bring to a production? You know, everybody brings their voice, and they bring their experience. And for me, it's a bit of a maternal side of, you know, this show was amazing, and the cast, they were incredible. And there was so much I felt like I got to work with them on about, you know, let's talk about trauma. Let's talk about like, what if everything you ever thought was not what it ever was? And how do you want to know, if you're gonna ask the question, are you willing to learn what the truth is? And how do you work through that? And so I felt like there was a lot of great opportunity on this show.
Yeah, I do agree with you. I think the cast was really great. And I feel like I hear conversations around the challenge of casting diverse talent, and the challenge of nailing that authentic representation. And not only was this cast needing to be strong actors, but dancers and singers. And, you know, what was that casting experience for Utopia Falls? Was it as challenging as some might think it might be?
I mean, like, I dreaded it because I knew, you know, once we had gotten the green light, you know, I'm like, well, I kind of created a world where it's like incredibly like I like from the get-go, I'm like, yo, like there's no tokens, like it's all, everybody is there and blah, blah, blah. And so we got the green light, and I was like, oh man, like I know this is going to be tough. And I know specifically it might be challenging up in Canada. You know, if we were going to cast stateside, we might be able to find a few more faces for it. But you know, we thought it was going to be very, very challenging. It was very, very challenging. Shout out to Stephanie Gorin, who's our amazing casting director. You know, she, you know, anybody that knows in the industry knows that Stephanie is the type of person that works incredibly hard. She has an incredible team as well, and she goes and she looks in places that people don't normally look. You know, she goes digging for people. She loves theater. She you know, finds people in, you know, very different places. She doesn't just go for the normal names that you see, which is great, especially for you know, a show that needs to be as inclusive and as diverse as this, multiracial, multicultural. So she kicked ass. You know, I got high praise for her, and then, you know, I gotta say, the truth be told, because she did her thing, it actually wasn't that difficult. There was maybe a couple of roles still, you know, with Apollo being indigenous and needed to be indigenous because it's a very indigenous story. In this, there was a couple of roles that were a little difficult, but you know, she really came through and found them. So what I can say going through the experience is that don't believe the hype. You know, I really feel like we have made the most diverse show ever on Canadian television, and I don't think that it was as difficult as I thought it might have been. From our leads even to the background, we were able to pull together incredibly diverse cast, and there might be a lot of myths out there, or maybe it's just old heads talking about back in the day. But you know, for all the you know, creators of color and diverse creators out there who are trying to create their own worlds and put these things out there, don't let anybody tell you that you won't be able to cast it properly. You just need to take your time and you know, pull on the right team, but it's definitely possible.
Warren, earlier you had started to share about that sense among the cast and everyone involved that this was really something special. And I'm curious for you and for everyone, like, what were some of those moments on set and behind the scenes where you felt that people were really feeling that specialness of what you were creating? Or even just your favorite moments?
No, that's a great question. I mean, I was lucky to get episodes 7 and 8, which kind of ramped up to their performances, and definitely the performance aspect in it was incredibly important, and also, I mean, you know, stressful for the actors, because not only, like you said, they have to act, but they also have to do incredibly hard dance sequences, singing, playing instruments. But it really was sort of the thematic backbone that RT and the team of writers and Joe Malozzi, who was show running, put together in terms of just how New Babel was dealing with suppressing the kids, and I mean the, you know, the exemplars. I just loved how in certain moments there was one scene where we were shooting, and I think Devin, who plays Sage, turned to me and was like, well, this is new. And it was that sort of acknowledgement of like, she's played dancers before. In fact, RT and I worked on a show called Backstage, where it was all about a teenage dance singing academy school. But the role or the theme of how LGBTQ plus and race plays into this utopian society, I thought was very, very, very different. And I loved it. And I know that the cast responded to that. Sudz, Melanie, did you have a
question again?
Yeah.
Just what moments existed on set or behind the scenes that really sit with you about the uniqueness of this experience, whether it's for the cast or for yourselves as directors? What were some of those moments that stand out for you?
Well, personal. Oh, go ahead, Melanie.
I just remember when in my episode 5, so they went and they found this abandoned factory, which was originally I think it was a house in the original script, and I just felt like we got to find something interesting. We found this huge factory, and there was just a moment where when they first arrived there, and they all kind of like, it was like kids for the first time being let out at recess, right? And they were so excited to be out, and then, you know, in the beginning of that scene, they kind of come around the corner and they all just kind of disperse, and then they're just small in this big landscape. And I just felt like that moment, it just felt like this is the playground that we get to play with. And I felt like it was really important. And everybody was allowed to sort of be, and I think it was really honest. There was great writing in the show, and we were really able to come across all those performances really honestly. You know, it never felt like for the sake of it was really true. And so that moment to me just felt like this is it. Like, this is how
Right.
I'm playing. Mhm.
Like, I really enjoyed the dancing, like for me, because I usually do cop stuff and that's usually what I do, blowing shit up or whatever. And then the opportunity to see, like, RT had this amazing choreographer who does, like, you know,
Shout out
crazy.
Denise Scott.
She's amazing. Denise is
Amanda.
amazing. And so she worked with the cast behind the scenes and whenever they could, you know, be off. And then so when it came time, it was like, oh, you filmed it. Oh my God, it's amazing. And you get to see these actors / dancers do stuff. And it was like, just, you know, and Robin, who plays Aaliyah, she was like, she had to be on set all the time. Then she got to go to ADR. She had to sing. She had to do all this stuff. And there's a lot of pressure on her. She's number one on the cast. And to see her just sort of shine, it was like, and everybody was like, wow, you know? And it was like great to see somebody just like rise to the occasion and just be in that moment. I just felt so happy for her. And then there was one time when we had to do some like just some montage bits, and you know, it's always like, okay, montage, okay, just do it. So it was like them just dancing, the group, that core group dancing, and Philip Lewitsky, who plays Apollo. Everybody's kind of down on him, not down on him, but like didn't think that he could dance because he was just kind of like up rocking, do all this stuff. He gets down and does this spin move, and they all lose their minds. Like they genuinely lost their minds, and it made it into the final cut. But it was like, whoa! But to see everybody like that was genuine. What they felt, they were like so surprised. But those days, like I think when you're genuinely surprised and you see some amazing stuff, I think that's what we live for as artists. And I think every day I go to work and I hope to see those kind of things. And I did definitely get a chance to participate in those moments on Utopia Falls. And
yeah, I feel like I feel like you're totally right there. So it's like there's some really beautiful things that come from you know, when people do have to perform, you know, and you know, us as you know, Black storytellers, you know, we speak through a lot of different things, and there's, you know, dance is a big part of our culture inherently, you know, and you know, for me it was some of these hip hop things when Akel, who plays Bodhi, you know, first does his block party. You know, he's at More Times block party. And more times, you know what I'm saying? There's layers to this. There's layers to it.
You done know.
But you know, like, yeah, when he drops the first verse, you know, at a block party, which is also sort of, you know, a reference to the beginning of hip hop back in the day, you know, and just seeing Bodhi up there and him rapping, and then like, you know, the crowd feeling that, you could just actually feel the energy. And yeah, it's a bunch of, you know, we got our extras on set and they're whatever, but this is the first time that they're hearing Akel rap, and he's dropping, and they, like, you know, when we wrote the script, they don't know what's in the script, so when he's dropping disses on More Times, like, it's, you know, that's real, that's authentic, you know. And then one of the happier things that I was witness to was to see Devin, again, who's an incredible dancer, but when Sage, in the finale, when she takes what she's learned about capoeira, this martial art, you know, that is, you know, hidden in dance, and she starts to kick some ass with it. And that's Devin doing all of that. That's no stunt double. That's Devin working hard, putting in the time with our stunt coordinator, and doing that. And then she's out there doing those kicks and stuff. It was just energizing, and the whole crew felt it too, you know? So it's moments like those that, you know, really stick with me.
And RT, sorry to interrupt, but just a shout out to David Heyman and the music team, and David especially, you know, who
For sure.
Tragically passed away, but he was such an important part of the music.
Yeah, he's the heart of it. He's the heart of it.
Lifeblood, yeah.
You know, he's the heart of it. We would never, this show would not be anywhere close to what it is without that man. He's a genius, and you know.
His GoFundMe is still active for anybody out there that wants to or can donate to it, because it was tragic how he passed away.
Mm-hmm.
Much love to him.
Yeah, much love.
Rest in power.
I have so many questions for you all that I'm now looking like we have to move into some Q&A with the questions that have been submitted. So one of the things I want to talk to you about is just the audience reception of this. There was someone, I think who's in the chat, named Rachel. Shout out to Rachel, who sent this in. She said, for someone who stumbled upon this show from seeing a post about two women of color being in a relationship, I was pleasantly surprised. I'm always scared about shows being cringy and just using LGBTQ characters as bait for viewers, but I fell in love with each and every character. Thank you for this show and letting me able to see all of these complex characters. And that leads me to Cheska's question, which is, what did you feel when Utopia Falls was appreciated, supported, and loved by many?
I mean, that's everything. That's everything. You know, it's you know, when you come up with this kind of idea and you go, this is really about culture causing revolution and inclusivity being not just a catchphrase, not just something that you should do, but that it is integral to the series, and then really specifically taking our time to, make our main relationship in the show is a lesbian relationship between two women of color, and deciding we're not going to make this about them being persecuted about being gay. Their relationship is going to be a real relationship. It's going to be them trying to figure out how they can be together. And that's it. When you take time to do that, make an indigenous character that rediscovers that he's connected to a long history, and make that part of his story. Two young black characters that start to come into the knowledge of their history and the power of that, and to lead that. When you create these storylines and then your audience sees them and sees themselves in them, nothing can be better than that. And it's, our fans and our audience reception has been incredible. It was made for them, and I'm really happy that they're seeing it, they're finding it, and they're appreciating it, because it wasn't made for anybody else. It was made for people like us to see ourselves, as these heroes. So it's been incredible.
It was fascinating that first weekend. I remember texting RT because we dropped on a Friday on CBC Gem and Hulu, I think. And you literally could watch the evolution of a fan base. And this is it's one of the first shows I've been on first season. The only show that I can think of that has a really voracious fan base was Trailer Park Boys. Totally different show. But with Utopia Falls, to actually see the organic nature of a fan base suddenly find the show and then invest in it and then talk about it over a weekend. I remember they were questioning what they should call themselves, because every fan base has a name for it. And they landed on Utopian. And I remember texting out to whoever said that, it's like, you are Utopian One. It was really cool. I thought that was really, really cool.
Yeah. Have you noticed any differences in the fans in Canada versus the fans in the US?
Wow, that's an interesting question.
I don't know.
Really?
Do we know where they're, like, especially on Twitter? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the only time we can kind of figure out is like the platform that they're watching it on,
Okay.
So like people will jump on and be like, renew Utopia Falls Hulu, and then renew Utopia Falls CBC, and then let me shout out our other fans that are probably bootlegging this thing in different parts of the world. We got people in the Philippines, we got people in South America, they're just shouting us out and like, yo, it's down there. So we got a Russian contingent, so yeah, it's pretty wild.
Worldwide.
Yeah.
Ida has a question here. How were the directors chosen? And was there a focus on diversity?
Yeah, there was definitely a focus on diversity, as you can see. I mean, how were they chosen? It was just kind of like, I'd love to have a crew of directors that are as diverse as the show. So that was just one of the first things that I said. And I wanted to have different voices. So, you know, I mean, Sudz has been, you know, a mentor to me over the years. I mean, we first met. I feel like we first really met when I took a screenwriting course that Sudz was teaching. Not to age you, bro. But yeah, so and that was, you know, that was a little bit in the past, and then just like, you know, he's always been there for me to you know, give him a call and get advice and talk, and obviously, you know, he's an OG. He's done this many times before in terms of executive producing shows and movies and whatnot. So and then Melanie, I just heard really great things about. You know, from she worked on Joe Malozzi's show Dark Matter, and you know, just he had great things to say about her, and I was like, you know what, let's get her in, and then we just kicked it off in that. I think we just ended up talking for like over an hour and a half in that room, which was wonderful, and you know, and then Warren's, you know, one of my oldest friends. Again, you know. Back to music video days, Warren actually taught me really the importance of editing and really taught me to edit, you know, back in the day. So, and then we had a weird dream, like I had a weird dream like 2 years ago or 2 years before this. So 4 or 5 years ago. And I called him when I woke up, like, Warren, man, I had this vivid dream. We're both on set. It's like our show, and I'm telling you, I need to get the Steadicam from you. And you're like, yeah, you know, just give me a second. And we were like, we need to do something that we're going to work on. And then lo and behold, this thing came around, and I was like, well, we gotta have a chance to recreate that dream. So I gotta bring Warren on, so that at one point when he's on the floor, I can walk over to him and be like, hey man, hurry up. I need
Where's the Steadicam? I think that was a backstage nightmare, probably reaction of being on that show.
Oh, good.
Well, after falling asleep to watching the series, I had a dream that I competed in the Exemplar. So I look forward to being a part of season 2.
Definitely.
Excellent.
Definitely look forward to having you.
I can't sing or dance, but you know, I'll be
Well,
there.
Evie, you could host the Exemplar, the 74th Exemplar.
I'm so excited that we are recording this. I'm so excited that this is here and we are noting this. Earlier, you know, you were talking about just being directors and how so many of you are breaking that idea of what a director looks like. I'm curious, like, what's been, and this is a question that came from someone who's listening right now named Yaz, about your journey. What has been pivotal for you in your director journey towards nurturing your instinct, especially as you occupy positions that, you know, some people aren't expecting you to be in? Like, what has been key for you in being able to really nurture your instinct and trust in your instincts?
I think, like, just to kick it off, I think you have to get advice from people who've done this before, because it's almost like permission to breathe. And it's like, I know that, and it's weird. Like, I had the first guy who ever hired me was a guy named Sean Levy, who has gone on to direct like Night at the Museum, and he's the, you know, boss on Stranger Things and all that stuff. But he told me, like, the first day I was on set, he said, you have to assume the authority or else somebody else will. Because I was coming from like making my own stuff, paying for everything. Everybody's a volunteer. and just being really sort of like, thank you. So I was super green, and he hired me on this half-hour show called The Famous Jet Jackson. And so he liked the short that I did. And he was the first person to give me a job directing. And that was a hard thing to do, to get a job directing. It's like the hardest thing to do, one of the hardest things to do. So he said, because he noticed that I was like super green, and this guy was kind of like, this camera operator was kind of like, you know, pushing his weight around. They said, you can't really do that. You have to occupy the space of a director. You can't let people run over you or whatever. And I was like, oh okay. You know? And I think that, you know, without that, like, then it's like more encouragement, like, oh, okay. People say, oh, I like your work. I like this. You have to get, and it's weird, like you have to know your own voice, but it's almost like you need to have other people believe in you. And you need to put yourself open and put yourself out there to be defeated and to be, you know, trod upon and to be rejected, in order to do that. Like, it's weird. It's a weird thing. You have to get the encouragement from others. You have to be vulnerable, I think. And I think that's been sort of the thing that I work with Jennifer Holness, who's my wife and co-writer, producer. She's also director. She's directing a documentary right now. But it's like, we have to put ourselves out there and be vulnerable in order, and be disappointed and be fucked up and be, you know, rejected.
And fail, yeah.
And fail, and ultimately fail. But at the same point, you do get people say, oh, I like your stuff, you know, and you just have to continually put yourself out there to be destroyed, to be sort of rebuilt again.
I'm really curious, Melanie, your response to that, because I know 5 years you made a very conscious effort to choose being a director and move away from script supervision. So what has that journey been like for you in terms of nurturing that instinct?
Well, it's interesting. Like, I think because I came to directing with like knowing, like I was comfortable on the floor with production, it was really about actors and working with actors. That was the hurdle for me, to be honest. And like feeling comfortable and confident enough in developing those relationships. But to further what Sudz was saying, it's more for me was about like understanding vulnerability, like to really understand it. And because like every single person has it. And I feel my approach to my work is understanding somebody is, the camera operator is vulnerable in their pitch for how to start the shot, perhaps. Or, you know, an actor is the most vulnerable. It's the craziest career, to be honest. It's all about like rejection and putting themselves out there in this way. And you have to understand.
And especially now with COVID, they're going to be the most vulnerable on set, for sure. Yeah.
For sure. And I think like I value the person behind the vulnerability, and I allow that to be explored, and I allow the set and everywhere to feel like a safe space to sort of work with that. So I feel once I kind of really understood that with, you know, what people are putting out there and how to work with that, and really you can elevate so many people and so many stories and, you know, the process and the final product and everything just through really being, I think, in tune with that.
Warren, I would have loved to get you to answer this question.
No problem. Yeah, let's do it.
We're going to move on to some of these submitted questions. James says, thank you so much for doing this talk. How did you go about balancing the political and historical background in the story versus the desire to simply create a kick-ass sci-fi show?
I totally wasn't listening. I'll just say like we're getting the thing of saying that we should be closing down a little bit, but if anybody knows, when I do these talks, I've gone a little long on some of these things, and I'm happy to be here for people.
Let's do it
if we would like to. I don't know if you guys, I know that you all have some things to do, but if you all are, the Academy is open to us talking for a little bit longer, if you'd like.
Okay. Well, let's keep it going, and let me repeat James's question.
Cool. Thank you.
He says, I apologize if I missed this, but how did you go about balancing the political and historical background in the story versus the desire to simply create a kick-ass sci-fi show?
You know, like it's interesting because all of these things that people wonder about, how does this stuff come together properly? How do you create a show that has performances but is a science fiction show or whatever the deal? It's really strange. Like, it kind of just came together a little organically. I mean, that's probably not a blueprint for somebody, but, I think it just started with the germ of the idea. The germ of the idea is this society claims it is one thing, but it needs to be revealed that it is not. And the leaders of this revolution, these young people of color, they need to draw on something to do that. And what they do is they draw on the history. They pull up the history and they start learning and educating themselves about that. And that is the catalyst for the change. So from that germ of an idea, it became very simple. It's not just self-righteous speeches and then grab some guns and go attack the thing. There's a culture here that is suppressive of certain voices and of certain culture. And so these young people, they're going to go discover that culture. They're going to find out that culture from Snoop Dogg and the history that's in this archive. And then they're going to come and reveal that to the rest of their society. And with that came plenty of opportunities to go mine for, civil rights culture and how that can inform the history of hip hop and how that can inform, different forms of oppression that have come before them, so they can find out what the results of that and how people coped before, how people protested before, how they hid their own martial arts, how they did these things. And then they could then use that as weapons to attack their oppressive government. So it actually it was very organic once you had that sort of starting point.
Rachel had submitted this question earlier before the panel
love Rachel.
started.
Rachel's got great.
Shout out to Rachel. She submitted a lot of questions, but she did want to know, how did Snoop Dogg get involved?
RT just called him.
On speed dial.
I cannot say that, but once again, shout out to my brother and the heart of this show, David Heyman. We were having a talk about this archive and the standard sort of science fiction AI, has usually like a very proper, English voice, a soft-spoken voice. And we're like, well, we could go that route, but, we're talking about a show that's about bringing hip hop and culture back. So like, who can we get that would be an interesting choice for this? And honestly, we were racking our brains, and then David Heyman's like, what about Snoop Dogg? His voice is iconic. And I'm like, oh my, I've worked with Snoop on several music videos before, but, it wasn't until David brought him up, and then we're just like, of course, like, why not? And it was a shot in the dark, and, it took a little bit of maneuvering. Obviously Snoop is a very, very, very busy person. But yeah, I mean, we kicked it down the lane, and he just found it interesting. So we got him to come in and do some parts for us. It was great.
Yeah. I liked imagining like who else it could have been. Like, what if DMX voiced it? Like, what if he could have been in the mix?
He was on the list.
Yeah?
He was on the list.
I like it. Ian has a question about the visual effects. How involved were you as directors in meetings around the visual effects? When do those meetings begin? And what do those meetings look like?
Well, those meetings always happen in prep. I mean, it's one of the first things you do. Like, you sit in your first meeting and you go through the script with all the department heads, and, the effects supervisor is there, and we talk about, certain things that will be VFX shots. And then, through a few days later, you meet again with a specific VFX meeting and talk about your hopes and dreams. And then they tell you how much money they would cost. And then you dream bigger and push for big enough, right? And so basically that's the process I think that's, for us guest directors who are onto the show, I think in the beginning, RT, obviously you can speak to like the whole show as a whole. There wasn't too many VFX in this show, really.
Yeah, for a science fiction show, it was really grounded in the textural value of all the different sectors in New Babel, I thought. And then, RT, you could probably talk about the big sort of expansive establishing shots and world building.
Yeah, I mean, that was just, worked with a great VFX supervisor, Greg Brands. And, we a lot of the first season of the show does take, they're in a bubble. And they don't know they're in a bubble, so it really does take place within this world. And so, by design, there wasn't a lot of special effects needed, because most of this first season is about them figuring out where they are and then trying to knock that bubble down and then see what's beyond. So, Mel had some of the more VFX heavy episodes where they got to the edge of the bubble and they started to figure out that this is where they are. But Greg and his team kicked ass. They kicked ass, with the amount of money that they had and really put together a really beautiful like layout of the stuff and many discussions. It was definitely very involved as to figure out what we could do and what we couldn't. But I think they did a bang up job in helping us to create this vision.
Honestly, Ify, the special effects, at least for my episodes, and even Mel and Sudz can attest to this was the background extras. It's just trying to get enough performers to inhabit these sectors and make it look really full and kind of achieve RT's vision of what reform looks like and feels like and progress and everything. So shout out to the cast and especially the background performers that we relied on to make this world seem alive all the time. That was fascinating as a director to try to make 20 people look like 100 during a revolution, which is always a challenge.
Yeah. I remember we had a lot of creative talks about the bubble and the shield and what that shield looks like. And when my episodes we were outside, otherwise they're always inside. So here we are outside, and and when we look up, do we see it all the time? Is that something? Is it a texture thing? Because I had, one of our characters puts his hand through that, and we see beyond that. So I remember we had a lot of talk about that creatively, how that would work, and lots of references and back and forth, and it turned out great.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna get to a question from David, which I think is kind of related to this conversation. Are there any ideas that you weren't able to execute based on budgetary restraints?
I think more so there was a big reveal that Aaliyah was going to discover. We had actually written a whole scene where she I think it's in one of your episodes, Warren. It's the episode, is it 7 or 8? But she basically stows away and goes to the edge of the shield, and then comes out and sees.
Oh yes, in the truck.
And that was originally written very differently in terms of how that how that system works. So it wasn't really a truck before. It was going to be like a hyperloop train that was underground, and it would surface, and she would see that she was actually beyond the bubble, and that she would see some of these other cities. Spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't watched it.
You should. They should have by now.
Watch it
again. Watch it again.
But yeah, so that was a sequence that we were from the script stage we were designing, and then we couldn't afford to do that, so it became a little bit lower fi. But truthfully, in this version, the great thing is that she sees the shield open and sees beyond it, and then runs back and is, with this revelation. If we had done it the other way, actually, a lot of the storyline would have taken somewhere else, would have taken us elsewhere. So, yeah.
Well, and also, RT, just the exemplar itself.
Oh, without a doubt.
having more days to shoot it and more of a crowd to integrate it, there's always that sort of time issue with budget constraints.
Yeah. We shot that in like Cops Coliseum in Hamilton. The Exemplar stage was shot there. Yeah.
Okay, there's gonna be a rush of people heading to Hamilton, gonna take part in the Exemplar. Jennifer has a question. She says, I'm writing a screenplay with an AI element, and I keep finding some of my ideas have already been part of productions released as I'm writing it. Have any of you ever had issues like that? And did you decide to leave them in anyway?
Well, I've never seen anything with Snoop Dogg doing the AI, so.
and Jennifer also auditioned for it.
Yes.
Like for Utopia Falls, I guess. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. I think, look, and I'll everybody else jump in, but all I would say is, just realize what is important about what you're doing. So there's nothing under the sun that maybe hasn't been kind of touched on before. I mean, look, the world of Utopia, the physical structure of the world of Utopia and some of the sectors, that's derivative of lots of science fiction that we've seen. But for me, that was never what's unique about the show. What's unique about the show is that it's a cultural revolution. So quite frankly, I like the fact that it feels familiar in world, and then in fact, it's about culture. And so as long as, what you're writing, what the germ of it that is actually making it unique, then you don't have to worry about maybe that people have seen something like it before, because whatever you're bringing to it is going to be the unique thing. That's my answer.
Did anyone else want to add?
I think that as RT said, there is sort of, I don't want to say nothing new under the sun, but it's like you're going to see those ideas wherever you're looking, especially if you're going to look in the sort of the literature, the history of sci-fi that's been filmed. And if you go even further in terms of the history of the sci-fi that's been written, you'll see those ideas. But I think that you kind of have to look at them and put your own spin on it. Because we're always trying to push this further and into places that we haven't seen it. But if you have your vision, and again, your ideas about AI and how that filters out, I think that's some great things if you can put your own spin on it. Because if you look at Ex Machina, for example, that's an old tale as old as time, but
Pinocchio.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a tale as old as time. So, but we can put our spin on it. So I'm by all means, but I think we all have those things happen with the stuff that we're writing. You always say, oh my gosh, I totally had that. Oh my gosh, this is on TV now. What the hell? It happens to everybody.
Yeah. Means you're onto something.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And the trick is actually executing it.
That's it.
Yeah.
David had another question where he said, recently an emerging director in the West Coast revealed some racist and non-inclusive practices by an American producer who provides a lot of work for Canadians. Have any of the directors on this panel had similar experiences where the producer had non-inclusive and or racist views? And I guess, how did you navigate that?
That's our careers. That's our careers. Honestly.
Can I ask you a question?
That's our careers.
I feel like people are talking a lot about this sort of reckoning, but you've been in the game a long time. Are you optimistic in this moment with some of the new conversation around anti-Black racism, systemic oppression? Just there's something about the laugh you just gave that I felt in my soul.
You want some real talk, Ify, or what?
Hit me with the real.
Okay.
I love this part of the show.
Real talk. I mean, it's RT asked me to join, to be a director and everything, and he's like, okay, and I was pitching myself as I can, there's not a lot of us who have had this experience of being a showrunner. I can count on one hand, and Floyd Kane, he's out here with Digstown, Jennifer and myself, You know, it's like very, you know, Marsha Green's Anthony Farrell, Marsha Green's getting her spot now. It's like, it's very, very few of us. And again, we talked about like a black body inhabiting a white space. That's been the story of our lives, you know, up until this point. So when we're actually talking about it, and this is the difference from, you know, police, and some reporter called me a couple of weeks ago, whatever, and I'm like skeptical because she's from some unnamed paper that just hasn't treated us fairly historically. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, whatever, I'll talk to you, but like I have no faith in whatever you're gonna, you know, however you're gonna represent what I have to say. But it's like we're having this reckoning in this moment about police brutality and how police treat black people, how police treat indigenous people, people of color. We're having this moment right now. But we need to have this moment about the education system. We need to have the moment about, you know, the healthcare system, the justice system, et cetera, et cetera. It's system-wide.
Seasonal workers.
Entire society. So because now it's no longer trending, so I have my, you know, I don't have any faith other than the faith of the young people today in terms of demanding collective action. Demanding action. That's what I have my faith in. I have my faith in them. Don't have the faith in, you know, in our gatekeepers. Mm-hmm. So in terms of like, you know, hearing what David's writing in terms of like, you know, revealing some racist, non-inclusive practices, the system is designed to protect itself. In film, when you're trying to get a job, you're going to get hired by somebody who knows you. You're only going to hear about the job, but from somebody who knows that person. It is designed to protect itself and keep you, you know, working with your friends. One of the things that RT asked me first is like, I want a diverse crew. He was working in a lot of music video, commercials, short form, but he didn't have like a long history of people who I knew. So I said, RT, I'll help you. I'll give you my list of all the cool people I know. Mm-hmm. And then he hired a lot of them, you know? And it was like, because he wanted to see in front of the screen and behind the screen represented like the community that we live in. It's really, really important. It was really important to RT. It's really important to me and Jennifer to have that, you know, representation in front of and behind the screen. And also, these are some of the best professionals that we have, because you want to work with the best people. But the fact remains, it's like those folks ain't going anywhere, you know. And people like these are very highly paid, highly sought after jobs. So it's very natural to sort of, you know, try to protect and try to hive off for yourself. And this is a fight. Like, let's not disabuse ourselves. Let's not like, you know, put any, you know, candy coating on this. The real work begins now when it's no longer trending. That's when the real work begins. So if we want systemic change, we are going to have to demand it. And we're going to have to fight for it and put our necks on the line. So that's what's going to have to happen, you know, and it's not easy and it's not convenient and it's not polite.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
And the work continues. I mean, I myself had to really take a look at where I was mid-career. You know, I've made 11 feature films, but in the 10 previous films before I made Things I Do for Money, which is my newest film, I've never cast a Japanese Canadian in a significant role. And that's on me. That's my blind spot. That was my fault. And a lot of it has to do with being Japanese Canadian and my relationship to my heritage. And it's complicated because of the internment and how after the internment, all of the sons and daughters of Japanese interned people were assimilated as quick as possible into the culture and made to try to fit in and not get bullied. And now, you know, in my 40s, I'm able to look back and go, wow, I was part of it too. And I have to undo a lot of that. So being able to work on a project like Utopia Falls has made me really kind of confront my blind spots not just as a director, but just as a human. And the work continues. You know, it's even though I'm a person of color, I fully attest that I have work to do.
And I think it's up to, you know, on any shows you do, it's as RT was saying too, you know, you push for diverse and cast and crew and just everybody across the board.
Mm-hmm. It's got to be just a requirement, you know. And I think with, you know, look, like Sudz saying, it's going to be, it has been difficult. It's going to continue to be difficult. The hope, you know, I'm an optimist at heart, but I say that I'm a cynic in the streets. It's the reality of it is like this. We have to demand and push forward. And some of that battle is just like straight up pushing. Some of that battle is making sure that they do understand that there's money in it as well. There's a benefit to them as well. Yeah. Like if you hire more women and you hire more people of culture and you explore these things, then you're going to broaden this audience. You know, it's about multiple fronts that we have to push on. And then as the people writing and creating and, you know, being able to bring these universes to life, when you have a chance to do it, then you are the forefront of that fight. You're the tip of the spear, and you're the one saying, no, I want gender parity. I want, you know, I want Black, you know, camera people, and I want Black writers in the room. And, you know, it's just demanding those things because, you know, look, once this thing starts going, it keeps going, and it's going to want to keep going by itself. And they'll have lots of ideas, you know, to keep it going. So you have to be the one that's speaking for this stuff. But it's going to be a collective journey for all of us. And, you know, it's not going to get easy. It's just going to be hard, but we got to do it. You want to see the change? We got to be the change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it'll be so interesting to see, especially once the coronavirus pandemic is behind us, is who's left to do this work, especially among, you know, creators.
Knock on wood, Ify.
Yeah, do it. I want to ask a final question because, truthfully, we could just be here all day. But the
last time RT said, let's just keep going, Utopia Falls panel went 5 hours on a Zoom.
Really?
Yes, yeah, BIPOC TV and film.
BIPOC TV and film. We went
5 hours?
Yeah, we went 5 hours. I was like, we had so many people and they had questions, and I'm like, look, y'all take your time to be here with us. So, you know, I'm gonna take my time.
That's lovely.
Beautiful. Well, I don't want you all to watch me cook because that's. But I'll bring this laptop into the bathroom with me.
It's a whole new show.
You know, but this has come up multiple times, both in the chat and in the Q&A questions. People asking about season 2. Is there a chance that it'll be renewed? How have you envisioned the multi-season episode arc? What do you anticipate for season 2? Lots of people curious everywhere about season 2 of Utopia Falls. What can you tell them?
So here's what I will say. There's a company called Hulu and there's a company called CBC, and you need to holler at them, email, tweet them, tell them to renew it. For you all to know, I have from the beginning, I had sort of 3 seasons of story that I, you know, wanted to tell. So, you know, there's definitely a plan for a season 2 as the world expands with these characters, and the struggle and the protest and the revolution continues. So the story is there.
Mm-hmm.
We just need the support. So, you know, we're waiting to see.
Mm-hmm.
The talent is there too. I saw a tweet, CBC actually responded to somebody saying, this is actually a Hulu show, so you should tweet out at them. So maybe if you want to focus this sort of correspondence to Hulu.
All right then.
So I think what we're saying is a sit-in at the Hulu offices until
that's That's a very Utopia Falls thing to do, I think.
Utopia, go. Let's go. Stage a sit-in.
Yes, I already know the soundtrack that we can play while we do it. With that, I'm going to thank you all so much for being a part of this panel, and I'm going to hand things back off to Melanie, I think, who will do a more formal closing off.
Hi. Hello. Yes, I'm still here lurking with my camera off, but now I'm back. I just want to thank each of you. Thank you so much for taking time out of your crazy